as well. My name is Katherine Wiedemann. I'm the behavior analyst at Roselle. I've been here for a few years, and I'm really happy to be helping everybody, try to navigate. I'm doing it myself, so I come to you not only as a school professional, but I'm also a parent that's navigating our own trials and tribulations with virtual learning. And it's been an experience. I think that we can all agree with that. But what I want to focus on tonight, and this workshop we made specifically for parents of students in special education program, who may be receiving, additional therapies on top of the classroom sessions. But we wanted to have a special forum for you guys to be able to voice your concerns and your needs, because sometimes every child obviously has different needs, but in our community, sometimes there are additional things that, you may not be comfortable talking about in a huge room full of people. And we would love to talk about that here. So tonight, I'm gonna talk to you. I found that it's easier, rather than introducing like 17 different concepts and confusing you all. I've found that for me, it's the easiest if I keep it simple. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is basically, well, if I can get my slideshow to work, is basically prompting. Prompting is going to be our main topic of conversation tonight, and many of you that I recognize from the list of attendants, I'm sure, are very familiar with prompting. Prompting is one of the evidence-based practices within ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, and it's also an evidence-based practice for children with autism, but it's not specific to, the use for children with autism or even children with special needs. Prompting is something that happens day in and day out in our own lives. We're prompted by things. And we're going to talk a lot about different kinds of prompts and what prompts we can use to help our students. But, just an example, a stop sign is a prompt. So that's a visual prompt in my environment that tells me what to do. And I've learned over time with history of reinforcement and punishment to look at those prompts, the things that are happening in the environment, and respond according to them. So, but I'm going to tailor this specifically to you guys about prompting and how you as parents can use it, or whoever, and I'd love if you pass this information on to anyone else that is a caretaker for your child or may be involved or present during virtual learning. These are things that you can definitely pass along. I will ask you, if you have a moment and you'd like to receive this presentation in the PowerPoint format, if you put your email address into the chat box, I'll be able to take it out of there and send this to you after the presentation. So I'm happy to do that. So we're going to talk about prompting. That's going to be the bulk of the workshop tonight. We're also going to talk a little bit about attendance. And then, as I said, we're going to have a Q&A portion of the workshop where you can, ask me specific questions. What's working, what's not working? What's a situation that you were in recently during virtual learning where you didn't know what to do or how best to help? So prompting, how do I know when my child needs help responding, and what do I do? So what is a prompt? Prompts, as I kind of mentioned before, are instructions, gestures, demonstrations, touches, or other things that we arrange or do to increase the likelihood that children will respond to something correctly. So the short of it is that sometimes a child doesn't know what we're asking them to do, or sometimes they have no history with the expectation or whatever the person is asking the child to complete. And rather than just letting the child kind of fumble and flail around and not giving them, the idea of what they're supposed to be doing, we can use prompting. So the utilization of prompts is a positive way of teaching, and it basically encourages learning because students are continually making progress and they're not thwarted or discouraged by hearing the word no time and time again. And really, when a child does something incorrectly, or in many cases doesn't respond at all, just saying no or saying that's wrong or saying that's incorrect doesn't really provide them with a framework of how to respond more appropriately in the future. We can use every incorrect response or every lack of a response as a teaching opportunity to show the child what it is we're looking for and what we're asking them to do. And by the process of prompting our kids to respond and to respond correctly, and then providing reinforcement after those prompts, even if a child does something with prompting, we always want to reinforce them so that they learn, oh, this is what they want me to do. So when the word no is overused, learners can easily become desensitized to it. I know this as a parent. I always make sure to say on these presentations that I do that I think I'm a pretty good behaviorist, but I am an awful behaviorist in my own home with my own child. She she rules the roost around here, and it's very difficult to do with my own child. So I come to you from a place of humility with all of this. I wouldn't want anyone to just pop in on our virtual learning sessions at times, because it can really be a mess. But when we say no a lot, children can get desensitized to it. It doesn't hold the weight that it once does, and it certainly doesn't change their behavior or their responding a lot. But the flip side of this is that if we use prompting instead of no, we can keep the meaning of no, so that when you really need to use no, like someone's running out of the front door or going towards a hot grill, it retains its urgency. So that's important. And today we're not necessarily talking about behavior in the way of like negative behavior or maladaptive behavior, but these concepts and prompting, they apply to both learning and behavior reduction. So when I'm talking about prompting tonight, it's going to be mostly through the lens of helping your child learn and helping your child attain skills. But you can also think of this in terms of behavior and things that you might be struggling with right now at home with trying to reduce behavior or encourage and promote positive behavior. So the other plus side of prompting is that because there are so many different types of prompts to select from, there's a really wide selection from which to choose to accommodate different learning styles and abilities. So for example, kids who are really great readers, and I know that some, I don't know if any are familiar with a term hyperlexia. So hyperlexia is when a child is really, really above level in reading. They can decode pretty much any word. We see this sometimes in autism. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have the commensurate reading comprehension skills to go along with their reading ability, but I've worked with 2-3-year-old children who can read literally any word. So these students, I'm happy because I get to use written prompts or words that I have printed out. So students who might be visually impaired can be assisted with physical prompts or verbal prompts. So we can tailor the situation to whatever the needs are of the specific student and figure out what kind of prompts work best. So I'm going to go over, and this is, if you leave your email in the chat, I'll be able to send you this because it's a great resource just to have as a cheat sheet for those of you who aren't as familiar with different prompting. It can get different prompts. It can get a little bit confusing about what is what. And I'm going to try to give you as many functional examples of these things as I can so you can picture it. I also would recommend even a quick search on YouTube of prompting or types of prompts. There are tons and tons of videos of people actually demonstrating these kinds of prompts. So if you're not totally clear on what they look like, that's a great resource for you that you can do on your own time to just get a visual. I know I'm a visual learner, so I need to see things being done. And I thought about maybe using my daughter for this, but then I thought better of it. So I have no one here to prompt tonight except for my dog, and she doesn't listen to me. So I don't think that would go down well, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the different types of prompts that we can use, and then I'm going to talk about how we decide which one to use and then how to actually use them during virtual learning to increase your child's participation and engagement and responding. So a physical prompt is basically when you're guiding the child through the motions of something physically. So this is a lot of times called hand over hand prompting or hand over hand guidance, hand over hand assistance, hand over hand cueing. We use a lot of different words for prompts. prompts, cues, things like that. But a physical prompt is basically when we are kind of like in a robot mode, taking over the child's body and doing the response for them, or physically guiding them to do the response for themselves. But it's basically us doing it. So this can be full or partial. So a full physical prompt is literally just doing a hand-over-hand assistance through the completion of the task, and doing it for them, but with them. A partial physical prompt is the same concept, but it's a little bit dialed back. So instead of taking the child's hand, if the instruction is, Jimmy, touch your head, and taking that child's hand and moving it to his own head and tapping his head, a partial physical prompt might look like, once the instruction is given, Jimmy, touch your head, you may hold the child by the wrist or the elbow and raise it so that he's going in the direction of his head. And then when you feel that he's going there on his own, you release the prompt and he's able to touch his head independently. So that's the difference between a full physical prompt and a partial physical prompt. The next kind of prompting is verbal. So we do this a lot, and verbal prompting, I think parents, that's like one of our strong points, is verbal prompting, because anything that you say to a child to encourage their response is a verbal prompt. So when I have to tell my daughter 19 times to clean up the milk that she spilled all over the floor, I'm providing essentially 19 useless verbal prompts because it's not working. I haven't moved to the physical prompt yet, but I mean, I may have to. But verbal prompts are basically, it can be one of two things. It's either speaking the response, the expected response aloud, or it can also be telling the student what to do. So parents, you may be doing this a lot in virtual learning when the teacher gives an instruction on the screen, and perhaps the child didn't hear it, or he may not be attending to the teacher, and so you have to repeat the direction to him. That's considered a verbal prompt. But a verbal prompt can also be like a fill-in statement, or you're basically providing the child with what it is that they're supposed to say. So verbal prompts can be full or partial also. So in a full verbal prompt, you are speaking the entire response in the hopes that your student will echo it or mimic it. In a partial verbal prompt, you only speak part of the response and you let the child hopefully finish the sentence, or finish, whatever it is that you started. So for example, if I'm teaching a student to answer the question, what is your name? And he's never answered it before, I may start off by saying, what's your name? Patrick. And then hoping that he will say Patrick. Now, with students on the spectrum, a lot of times we have difficulty with this because of something called scripting, which I'm sure some of you are very familiar with, which is where a student repeats things that he or she has heard, or immediately or with a delay. So a lot of times when I say, what's your name? Patrick, the student might say, what's your name? Patrick. And that's a tricky one to figure out, but we can figure it out. That actually may be more helpful to use a different type of prompt there. And we'll talk about what some of the other options are. I like to say that and we'll talk a little bit about these prompts in kind of a hierarchy. So which ones are not the best and worst, but which ones are the most intrusive, meaning like the most amount of help, the highest level of guidance. Especially when it comes to behavior, I try to stay away from verbal prompting with any behavior that is kind of fulfilled by attention, because there are a lot of other ways that you can give information to kids other than speaking to them. We rely on speaking to them a lot because that's how we communicate with other people in the world. But sometimes we have to consider the fact that that may not be the most effective way. Another thing I'm going to just mention about verbal prompting, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on when we talk about considerations of using prompts, is that sometimes we overestimate a child's ability to comprehend information that's given verbally. So sometimes I'll see, you know, a direction given and the student doesn't do anything. And then the adult gets very frustrated. Like, why isn't he listening to me? Why isn't she listening to me? And it may not be that they're not listening to you. It may be that they have an audio processing issue, or, you know, something that we may not see on the outside. I say, you know, we should never, it can be very difficult to take other people's perspectives, but especially when we're talking about children with special needs, we don't really know what their world looks like or sounds like or feels like. And with children that have sensory integration concerns, we don't know. Sometimes I think I work with children who don't even really process verbal information that great. They may hear us like the Muppets lady, the wah 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 lady. And if we're only relying on verbal information for our child to know what to do, we may be left frustrated because that may not be the mode that they comprehend the best. So verbal prompting definitely has its place, but I would challenge you all to think about other ways that you could prompt during virtual learning, whether they be physical or some of the ones that we're going to talk about next. So gestural prompting is one that I love. Gestural prompting, it is a physical kind of prompt, but instead of taking the child's hand and guiding them through, you're just either pointing to something, gesturing to something, indicating something. So a gestural prompt in real life could be, you know, if I know that my daughter, you know, I let her watch videos for a few minutes, but it's almost time to get back to work, I may get her attention and point to my watch or point to my wrist, indicating your time's almost up. That's kind of an evolved one, but an easy gestural prompt is, let's say your child is doing a puzzle and he's kind of stuck and he doesn't know what to do next. Instead of giving a verbal prompt, like pick up the piece with the cow, or a full physical prompt, you may only have to point to the next piece or just gesture towards the next piece. And he will get the idea of, oh, that's the next piece I need to pick up. So gestural prompting can be very useful. The next kind of prompting is visual prompting. So I love visual prompting, and visual prompting is actually under the umbrella of visual supports, which is another evidence-based practice for children with autism. And there's also a lot of research for other disabilities that visual information given visually can be very, very helpful and very useful for children with special needs. So a visual prompt is basically anything that you're providing to them that they can look at. So this could be a picture, this could be a written word on a card, this could be a sentence script of what you want their response to be. And I'm going to show you a video, a short video a little bit later of this in action, of what a visual prompt could look like for a certain task. But I love visual prompts, and something like, you know, I know some of you have used first then charts or picture schedules to outline, you know, what's coming next. Those are all visual prompts. And as much information as you can give to children visually, the better. I know that I'm a visual person, so I always laugh that, you know, sometimes I find myself in a school that I'm unfamiliar with, and if I need to use the bathroom and I ask someone, hey, where's the bathroom? And they just rack off a bunch of directions verbally, like, oh, well, you go down to the end of the hallway, take a left at the double doors, make a right, and then you go under the stair. By the double doors, I'm completely lost, but I pretend like, okay, thank you. And then I just hope that I run into somebody down the hallway that can direct me further, because I am a visual person. Now, if you were to give me just a little map or a little drawing of how to get to the bathroom, I would have no problem. So we have to think about the way that information is being provided and how we can supplement that information so that the child is getting it and can respond to it. So an example of this would be, if you're teaching what's your phone number, obviously I don't think any child's going to be able to just rack off the 10-digit number off the top of their head. One way to teach it is to start with a card where you have the number written out so that they have a visual prompt to rely on. And the video that I'm going to show you later shows how to fade that prompt, which is another really important concept that I want to hit home to you guys tonight. And then the final kind of prompt that we're going to go over tonight is it's either called a model prompt or an imitative prompt. And it's basically what it says in the description is you're doing what the expected action is yourself. So if the teacher on virtual learning says, okay, everybody clap your hands, and your child, is just staring out the window after a few seconds, you may get them to look at you and you clap your hands to show him or her what it is that's being asked. So this can be a very useful tool. So for some students, imitation may not be their strong point and may be something that has to be taught. So for a student that has difficulty imitating naturally, this might not be one that is as useful. But again, it's really about, and you all know your kids better than anyone in the world. So I'm sure you're already thinking, about which of these prompts could be the most useful for you during virtual learning and beyond. So let me get here. Some of these slides are not showing. Where's my little picture? Not working. Hold on, I have a picture here. I may have to, give me 1 second to put it back in. Okay, can you see it there? Well, I don't have your faces up, so I don't know, but you should see a little picture here. So this is what's called the prompting hierarchy. So this is kind of like the food chain of prompting. And when we talk about prompting and the food chain and the hierarchy, like I said, it's not best and worst. It's really the term that we use is intrusive. In this graphic, they call it invasive, which sounds pretty awful. It sounds like a home invasion. We're not really using it there. But what we're saying is that there are certain prompts that provide more support than others. And so something like a full physical prompt is the most intrusive prompt you can provide. So it's the highest level of support that you can deliver when you're prompting. You can see at the top of that food chain is the word independent. And when we're thinking about all of this stuff, prompting and all of these terms, what we're really wanting to think about is that we want to get our children to as close as independent with things as possible. That's obviously everyone's goal. That's parents' goal. That's the teacher's goal. We want our children to be as independent as possible. And, nobody will ever be completely independent in all things. I know that I'm not, but we really want to try to get as close as we possibly can. I always say that best case scenario, no one's going to be there when, my child is 30 years old and her alarm goes off in the morning because she needs to get up for work. Nobody's going to be there in her apartment with a bag of Oreos, to prompt her and say, come on, Emmy, do you want an Oreo? You have to wake up. You have to brush your teeth. So we really always want to have that goal of independence at the front of our minds, and be asking ourselves, how can we utilize these things so that we keep that goal in mind? Because the opposite of that, and you may have heard this term before, when a child is prompt dependent or very dependent on prompts, that is not always the best situation, because we want, for the child's quality of life, we want them to be as independent as possible. It increases their self-esteem. It increases their functional independence. It could mean the difference between two kind of living facilities in the future. You never know, but we always want to aim towards independence as much as we can. I remember a story. I worked with a little guy. I knew him when he was 3, and we worked together. And when he was 5, he went to summer camp for the first time, and we were putting him in an inclusive camp. So he was going to the town YMCA camp. And he had done such good work that we really thought he was going to do great there. And he was not going to have any support. We had spoken to the counselors and the director, and we had a system of communication set up. But when they arrived for their first day, his mom said, "Okay, honey, have a great day." And he looked at her and just froze. And he said, "But Mom, where's my person?" And he meant, like, where's my aide? Where's my therapist? Where's my person that's gonna show me how to do everything? And it was when I heard that story, it was like kind of bittersweet, because, obviously we always want to know, for our children to know that we'll be there. But in the same way, when a child is ready to fly, whatever that flight looks like, even if it's something, like, it doesn't have to be as big as going to summer camp on their own, but when they're ready to fly to the next level, we want to be there to support them, and of course be there for them if they fall, but really push them to do as much as they can. So and this is a great visual also to have as a cheat sheet, but independent is obviously the least restrictive, the least invasive. A gestural and visual prompt would be the next on the list. A verbal prompt would be next. A model prompt would be next. Partial physical prompt, and then full physical prompt. So basically, if you look at those in order, it's kind of like the amount of another person being there that you need to respond. So that's something, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Let me see if I can put my slides back big again. Okay, so the big question, oh my gosh, I took this presentation from like a sample one, and it was about science, and this one says this is a gas giant. They were obviously talking about planets. We're not talking about planets tonight, so I'm just going to delete that real quick. Okay, so how do I know which type of prompt to use? Great question. First thing to consider is, well, what's the task? Because that's going to highlight or rule out a lot of your options. So if the task requires the child doing something physically, like pointing to something on the screen, clicking to something on their mouse, completing something with their hands, like a puzzle or a shape sorter, or stacking blocks, or doing some kind of activity, you can use a physical, gestural, visual, or model prompt. If the task requires a verbal response, so the child has to verbally answer a question, you could use a visual, a verbal, or a model prompt. So there are options. Obviously, if the task is something, actually, I messed that one up. You can also use a verbal prompt for a physical response, but I tend to want to use the physical and gestural, visual, and model more. So that's the first thing you have to look at. What kind of prompt is applicable here? What kind of prompts are going to work out for us? And then the second consideration is really more important, and that is we need to ask ourselves, what is the least intrusive prompt he or she needs to be successful with this task? So let's say Jimmy has been working on the same puzzle for a while. If he can do it, if he can do the first two pieces on his own, and you know that, then he should be allowed to do the first two pieces on his own without any prompting. We really only want to prompt when it's absolutely necessary, so that the child doesn't fail and doesn't not know what they're meant to do. But we don't want to prompt just to prompt. We need to have a good reason, a good rationale for prompting. And when we do prompt, we want to really, and it's tricky because you have to take it sometimes a day at a time. Your child may one day require a lot more prompting than he'll need the next day. And when we're at school, we deal with that too. We have to figure out what kind of day is it, what else is going on that might affect his ability to respond independently. But we always want to choose from that list the least intrusive prompt, because again, remember, our goal is independence. And we can always kind of switch up our prompting. Like if a child initially needs a full physical prompt, but then you're able to step it back and do a partial physical prompt. If you eventually need to go back to a full physical prompt, you can, but it's better to kind of, when we're thinking about taking the training wheels off, we always want to have a plan for how we're backing up. And this is something that your teachers are very well acquainted with, because they've trained with me for hours and hours and hours and are sick of hearing about it from me. This is something that I can work with you with, individualize. Let's make a plan for, how you want to figure out prompt fading, what your child needs now, and what you want, what you want it to look like in a month or two. This is something that we can work on together. So that brings us to this idea of fading prompts and why fading prompts is so important. So like I said, our goal is always independence, and we should be looking to fade prompts to a less intrusive form. I'm going to show you a quick video of a teacher using a visual prompt with a student and fading the visual prompt. And I want to, there's tons of videos that I could show you, but I don't want to, I don't have all the time that I would like to do that, but luckily all you have to do is Google it. If you just Google any of this stuff, gestural prompt autism, gestural prompt cerebral palsy, anything, any combination of words with prompting, you can find some example of online. You could even, I didn't search it, but you could search like prompting for virtual learning, and I'm sure that some stuff will come up. But I will also put together, I'm going to put together a list of resources that I've looked at and that I can vouch for great video modeling, so that you guys can look at that too.
This next example shows an instructor reducing the amount of a visual prompt when teaching a student her phone number.
Okay, we're going to practice your phone number. What's your phone number?
310-555-2245.
Very cool. High five.
Each time the student responds correctly with prompts, then the instructor takes away one number until the student can say her phone number without any of the visual prompts.
Take this book. What's your phone number?
310-555-2245.
Wow, you're so smart. Way to go. Let me get this. What's your phone number?
310-555-2245.
Wow, very nice. What's your phone number?
310-555-2245.
Beautiful. Good job. That was awesome. I get to dress up the Barbie.
So that is an example of a faded visual prompt, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of what this might look like. And you know, it might be a little bit different for different tasks and for different kinds of prompting, but it's really important to fade our prompts over time. I don't want
This
to play
next
that again.
example shows an instructor.
No. Hold on one second. Okay. So this is a really important slide, and if you've dozed off, it's okay. I don't blame you. I'm really tired too. But if you pay attention to anything in this presentation, please tune in now. Something that I want, and I've been able to sit in on some virtual therapies and virtual conferences, and I actually have my own story about this particular issue and how I have been guilty of this. But we really want to get across to parents that before you're prompting your child, we ask you to just wait. Not forever, but just wait for a little bit. So as parents, it's our instinct to jump right in and help, especially if we, you know, don't think our child is going to be able to respond correctly. Whatever the case may be, it may just be habit. That's our instinct. And I actually had a scenario, I've told some of my coworkers about this, but I was sitting with my daughter. I was doing work at the counter, and she was sitting next to me on her virtual learning session. And it was a vocabulary lesson. And the teacher said, okay, who can give me another word for the word trip? And I don't know whether it was like the competitor in me that like wanted her to have the best, quickest word. I like nudged her. She was on mute. I said, vacation, vacation. And then I caught myself and I was like, what? Like, I didn't even give her 5 seconds to think of the word by herself. And another thing I didn't think of when I did that was that if she wasn't muted, then I just basically gave the whole class an answer. It's just a whole new world. It's basically like we are at school with our children all day long, which I don't think any of us really asked to be. But now that we're here, we just kind of have to figure out these things as we go. But it's really important if you're on a virtual learning session with your student and the teacher gives an instruction, just wait for a little bit. We have to take into account processing time, like I mentioned before, which can be totally different for some kids. I know some kids that I think it literally takes 5 to 7 seconds for that information to travel into their brains, through their brains, and to compute to them. You know, and if we're reaching in and we're answering before that information has even cemented in their head, then we're kind of removing the opportunity for that child to learn. So again, I am coming to you as a guilty parent. I sometimes maybe have to sit on my hands not to do it, or mentally zip my lips, or even have a visual prompt for myself, maybe have a little card in front of me that says wait, that reminds me of the behavior that is expected of me. But we just ask that you give them some time to respond on their own before initiating a prompt. Now, of course, this should be something reasonable. We're not saying that, a minute has gone by and now your child is singing a song that has nothing to do with anything. Of course, if their behavior is inappropriate, or they've given a incorrect response, you can prompt. But if it's just that they haven't responded yet, just give a little bit of time. Another reason that this is so important is because we're trying to do our best to assess progress and assess what's going on with our students, where they are in certain areas. It's obviously difficult, and we are very aware of things like skill regression, and we're very anxious to get them back in person so that we can really look at this stuff. But it's helpful to us in getting an accurate assessment if you let them respond. And if they respond incorrectly, that's okay. Or if they don't respond, that's okay. You can always look to your teacher for guidance on when to prompt. Like I said, everyone is very well trained in this. So anytime you don't know whether you should prompt, just have a conversation with your teacher about it, or you can email me and we can talk about it. We're all here to help you. So, as a general rule, and like I said, every child is different, we do recommend giving your child at least 5 seconds to respond before you provide assistance. So a quick note, and this is kind of linked in, but now that this first quarter is over and we're headed into December, I wanted to just say a quick note about attendance. We know that this is hard. I know that this is hard as a parent. The survey that we sent out, I'm getting a lot of really great information about what is holding you back from attending, whether it's virtual Schoology sessions with your teacher, or speech therapy, or ABA therapy, or OT. We know that it's a lot. And if you have multiple children, that it's a lot. And having all of this stuff, nobody, like I said, I don't think we ever expected to have to do this, and we're not necessarily that happy about it. But I know that we're all doing our best, and we appreciate that. We appreciate every minute that you give your child, because you are essentially their teacher now, with our help. But you are super important. And one of the things that I'm getting in the survey is that generally in the special education department, our students are requiring someone else to be there to really help them and guide them through to stay engaged and keep responding. So we know how hard you're working. If there's anything that we can do, whether it's changing a schedule or, looking at technological issues, if those are the reasons that you're not able to get to the sessions regularly, please let us know. You're not alone, and there are things that we can do and provide and offer to help with that. But it's really crucial, especially because we aren't seeing your kids in person, and because everything is remote, and especially for kids with special needs, it's so important that we have them as much as we possibly can. And this includes, like I said, classroom instruction on Schoology, group sessions, speech, PT, OT, ABA. They're all as important as the next. And some, when we're looking at IEP goals, and I know that progress reports are coming out soon, I took a very close look at progress reports and data and attendance data. And what I found, without a shadow of a doubt, is that students that were attending for me, since I'm the ABA girl, I was only able to look at the data from our ABA sessions. But students that attended those sessions at least 75% of the time made more measurable progress on IEP goals. And I'll even say that some students, it was almost like they were able to make similar if not the same progress that they would make as if they were in person. So we are here. We want to give you time and make this work. and support you as much as we possibly can. And looking into this new quarter, through February, and hopefully February is where this all ends. I can't make any promises, but if we can really gear up for the next few months and give this our all, the outcome will be better for our kids, not only because skill regression is a real concern, and the more that we can do to keep them afloat and even just keep them at the level that they are now, things will be a lot easier once we do get back in person, because there won't be as much to make up. And of course, listen, I'm going to have behavioral issues when we get back. I have had behavioral skill regression. I think we all have, but very important if you can make it. And if not, just send a note to your teacher, and we will be very accommodating. We want to support you and be on